instructor, so thank you so much for being here. There are some beverages and snacks up at the head of the table. We also have a sign-in sheet. There's one up here. I'm also going to pass one around. If you can scan the QR code and just sign in, indicating you're here, that will also allow for me to give the attendance records to your instructors if you're getting extra credit or credit for being here today. So before we begin, I would just like to make a few comments. So if you have any questions for the speaker, please save them, as we're going to address all of your questions at the end in a Q&A session. If there's any students, like I mentioned, please make sure to fill out that sign-in sheet so we can give you that credit for being here. And without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Professor Moffett. Professor Moffett is an author of 3 books of poetry: Making a Living, Nervous System, which won the National Poetry Series Prize and was listed by the New York Times as a new and notable book, and June and Eden. She has been awarded a Wallace Stern Fellowship from Stanford University, and her work has appeared in the American Poetry Review, Poetry, New England Review, among others. She is the senior poetry editor for the Southern Indiana Review. She will read today from her manuscript, To Hear a War from Far Away, which seeks to capture American motherhood in an era when our sense of time and space is dramatically altered by an infinite doomscroll of global atrocity and crisis. Without further ado, I'll pass it along to you. Thank you.
I'm going to sit up here. That's cool. Thank you, everybody, for coming. My students are here because they have to be here, and then there are some other people who are here, presumably of their own volition, which is exciting. So I wanted to start, for the benefit of my class, which is the Capstone Creative Writing class, by letting them into what I propose to do for this project. They all are doing creative work proposals in this class, and it's also sort of a sense of how do these things happen in kind of the real world. Like what kinds of arguments do you make for your creative work, and how do you contextualize it? So the abstract for this project, which I proposed to earn this course release, was this. I propose to engage in a close study of the works of 5 political poets, complete a series of poems that would make the foundation for a poetry manuscript, and to submit this for publication. The series will engage with the dailiness of American motherhood and the way devastation wrought, especially on children in Gaza, pierces this existence. Central to this project is a meditation on the fraughtness of complicity, insulating political rhetoric, and the way social media can invade, demolish, and reconstruct moments of private joy. The series will respond to ideas expressed by luminaries of political poetry, among them that the end goal of poetry is not empathy, but justice, Solmaz Sharif, or that art might reject the false premise of justice and reach instead toward liberation, Dion Grand. Part of the worth and appeal of this project is the way that it will explicitly pull the thread of political poetry conversation across decades and into the present moment. So here's another thing I ask my students to do, which is like, what interest does this have for someone outside of yourself? You know what you want, but how can you make it clear why someone else should be interested, right? So this is under the category interest to others in the field, contribution to the profession. This project continues with an important poetic lineage and fits into a conspicuous and egregious gap in contemporary poetry. What constitutes political poetry is an evolving question, including W.H. Auden's famous lament that poetry makes nothing happen, and June Jordan's assertion that poetry is a political act because it involves telling the truth. Both writers and scholars are deeply invested in this question. Many contend that poetry plays a critical role in the cultural archive, as well as within the rhetorical landscape, particularly in times of war and conflict. As the poet Solmaz Sharif observes, language, like the other democratic things, freedom of assembly, habeas corpus, is among the first casualties of war. The maiming and obliteration of language preempts and attempts to excuse the maiming and obliteration of bodies. The word obliterate, of course, has its root in literature and literacy, this destruction of language. Poets, as the caretakers of language, are called upon to respond, to defend their medium. Hence, this project takes on a new part in that caretaking of language, the retrieval from propaganda and denatured political rhetoric. I approach this series conscious of my positionality as a white American, a mother, and a professor. These identities and privileges are political and rarely scrutinized in poetry. This is a gap that many writers of color have been calling for white poets to fill. This series is significant because it intends to engage with that directive in an explicit and oblique way. In so doing, it opens the possibility for other poets and contributes to the scholarly conversation of the potential limits and pitfalls of political poetry. Okay, so there's more to an application for this sort of thing, but those are the parts I think that you might find useful. So the title of this series at present is To Hear a War from Far Away, which is a phrase I'm adopting from a very long series poem by Atel Adnan from her book In the Heart of Another Country. And it's a series, so there are kind of these fairly short chunk style poems, but they're untitled. They're all proceeding from this a title To Hear a War from Far Away. Okay. And typically I like to banter a little bit as I read and like make it fun. And there, unfortunately, in this series are no jokes. So I'm probably going to read more or less straight through. And then we'll have questions. To hear a war from far away. It was the animal in me, the mammal, the god in me, to make and then feed. Even when teething, she bit and drew blood. I fed her my blood. We slept. When she slept at last, she slept still latched to my breast in the dark. Unable to loiter any longer as holy or feral, I was back to work, back on the expressway when the news moved from the unsinkable American consumer to famine, a membrane between them through which weapons osmosed. Motes stirred in the sunlight by the swing set by a small boy with a stick, now a gun, now a sword, now he throws it to the ground, his mother appearing to flicker in the shade of a tree. All around me, the dream deployed its sedative sight lines, its airbags of fireflies, of fireworks, its love it or leave it. I did neither. I felt my country cut each bomb like a tooth, my shares growing fat on war, war growing fat on sorrow. On the radio, the starving baby's howl poured from the satellite's bowl into my ear, and my cells began to weep in their cages. The sound, a sound I knew, every mother knows the answer to. I felt a swell and a leaking, the cry with its straw thrust deep in my stores, my blood, like a coyote, lost in a subdivision, circled my body's cul-de-sacs. Before I was induced, I said, if it comes to where you must choose who to save, choose me. Her first sound tipped it over like an hourglass. Precious no longer to myself, no longer a self with borders. I leaked and sponged, was one with her pain, her prize, like corridors out of the cloister I had taken to be my body. I'm sorry if you don't understand. Why should I care? It's what I have come to call love. There was no more here and there. The baby on the radio starved, and I was as close to his need as I had been to my own baby in my own house, as close to my own death I would use if it came to that. There's traffic, the Philharmonic. There's the deadliest day. Our epidemic of listlessness, our ignorance and dissonance, hissing to life like sprinklers, lifting their heads from the university grass, the math wrong, the physics and civics, horror and organ gone vestigial. On the bombed hospital lawn, surgeons, and around their feet I placed each of the small dead in their shrouds in relation to my daughter, older, younger. I prefer justice to empathy, you said, to a large chamber interior of empire, me there in my folding chair, later asking a class, what do you go to art for? They all want to feel. insensate epidemic. The state of Indiana pinches the collar of a sniper, lifts him onto a university rooftop. Students are allowed to feel numb within business hours about beautiful toddlers in whose shrouds our Treasury found a good ROI. The state installs an invisible fence of disciplinary action around my mouth for my own good and plants begonias in fall, tulips in spring. There is a wellness fair and traffic. My child is older now than the one I thought was her same age. Each intact and oblivious campus building I enter has its opposite elsewhere. Early on and perversely, I had the urge to be harmed, as if to drain the supply. I admit now I had no notion of the supply, no stomach for it. The lavender, the gospel, the suffering that did not yield dividends in the spotlight. The girl backlit in the school on fire. Who among us has not become numb to the equal and opposite force I was taught can't be outrun? The taxpayers have paid. The universities are gone. Each office on campus is a blood vessel in a phantom limb. I saw my life was not an adequate response. Scraping the windshield with a credit card, my anodyne habits, groceries, walking the dog under the pocked moon, phone in my palm, my habit of forgetting another's suffering has nothing to teach me. Pain is weakness leaving the body, saith the poster in the gym bathroom. I've been fed enough lies to know how deep in my marrow they are. Pain's nobility, money's long needle, moving it aside, a la the epidural. I opted in to images of surgeons operating in dim light sans anesthesia, opted in to worse. My innocence was everywhere, in the air, in drifts underfoot, where I came across the occasional faceless angel. Open the apps, Al Jazeera, etc., to measure horror, the power of the dollar, the squares of fire in my palm, Instagram's tile floor of hell I hold and read. The figure in the corner is the brother of the burning brother, in his hand an extinguisher. In the New Yorker I read, but any war would look appalling if it just showed the suffering. He means one thing. I see another. It's one of those optical illusions, like the rabbit and the old woman. And the old woman is feeding couscous to a crowd, and the old woman is wrapping a white shroud around a man, and I hold her in my hand and cannot touch her. Beside an olive tree with adjustable wire limbs at the Subaru dealership, I rate my oil change experience in stars. Now is the time for peace. The B-2 Spirit bombers return empty to the roost in Missouri, Operation Midnight Hammer. Next to no one can sing the Star-Spangled Banner, composed as it is of questions. You're supposed to stand and cover your heart. I have watched a father hold a child's foot in the air while the president shakes another president's hand. I cannot be made to understand. I have shielded my heart. No victory declares its question mark, no olive branch its provenance. When all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a spirit. Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Yemen, Iran, soon we will have no history. In our country, our flag is everywhere, as if a name printed on a shirt in a memory care wing. This is the beginning, I am told, if we let it be. Arrests, if you disagree, deportations, sacrifice. I am moved again to think must come from how small we have been in the face of enormity. The trembling ground, heartache, the sound a barge makes fraying over the Black River. We've often called God. A lamb then, a point of focus, a a relief. We're in need of a small thing someone knows. The riot police, with their body armor like wasps and ice, wielding their orders to make us look over here, and the here has been disappeared. These tricks of faith that keep our eyes on one hand while the other hand rummages through generations, their orchards and herbs, pickpocketing them from the earth. Someone has been sacrificed, disappeared for spectacle, and the spectacle is small enough to rage against again. I rage. I fear this is the middle of the end. I fear the spectacle has been cut and placed in front of me the way I cut my daughter's dinner for her tiny fork. Her capacity is greater. She cannot yet be undone by immensity. We walk down the block. She throws rock after rock at the moon. So in this next one, and I could have mentioned the last section I wrote after Mahmoud Khalil was detained. And then now we have all of this ice in the news in Minnesota. And in this next poem, there's a line from a Gwendolyn Brooks poem, Paul Robeson. We are each other's harvest. We are each other's business. We are each other's magnitude and bond. And then you may have heard of Doctors Without Borders in French, it's Médecins Sans Frontières. And so in this poem we have Horreur Sans Frontières, which is horror without borders. For a short time, the unutterable, fresh like a wound in the mind of the like-minded mothers. Blame the torn borders of the body, the cortisol roller coaster cradling pomelo-headed babies. We scrolled the small hours past our magnitude and bond, thumbs light on the screen, the way once they glided over lips pre-kiss, tapping the broken heart emoji, the crying face emoji. Hunger pinning us immobile every hour or two, but our horror sans frontières floating like so many drones over other lives, downloading what? The soul's hard drive. I've heard it said it isn't over. I've heard the cloud is running out of room, emojis falling like rain, the storm drains to the river to the sea, the GoFundMe tosses restlessly in its screen. The toddlers don their doctor coats to dry our play tears, offer play pills, yell clear, and press the plastic paddles here where they once ate. Our play hearts pretend to begin again. And this is the last section I'll read. Beneath the apple tree in the meadow, I lie down in ovals of crushed grass where animals slept and rose at dawn and left. A hawk eyes me from drone height. I barely see it. Empire furnishes me with distance, what passes for distance. By some estimates, I've never traveled anywhere near Israel, never signed my name on a missile. Something imperceptible moves up my body. Its idea for me is to dismiss a feeling as nothing. Cruelty, like weather, gathers itself into a predictable shape. The hawk leaves with a cloud that promises to return to the ground what it's borrowed. Our wars have poisoned the water. Our veterans are free to board. I once thought a reckoning was close at hand. A verdict was ripening on a branch. When I pull the tick from my hair, I have my own blood under my nails. So that's what I'm going to read. Now we can have questions.
I want to say thank you for reading those remarkable poems. So if there are any questions that we have for Professor Moffett, she's happy to take those now.